I'm very excited to have Jonathan Shroyer, who's going to be on today's podcast talking about how he started something and built it. He started for a couple $100,000, sold it for several tens of millions. And so we're going to learn from him what it means to start up, to launch, to lead.
Welcome to Advance with Mike Acker, the podcast designed to help entrepreneurs, business leaders, and professionals alike break through barriers by improving their practical leadership skills and increasing confidence in speaking. Your host is a best-selling author, executive coach, and founder of the Advance Public Speaking School and Advantage Publishing Group, two companies dedicated to providing an edge for leaders. Find out more about Mike at mikeacker.com. Now here's your host, Mike Acker.
Hey, welcome to the program, Jonathan. I'm so glad that you are on it today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the opportunity, Mike. I love talking to you. You and I go way back, as well as I've heard some of your other kind of podcasts and some of the other leaders on. So I'm just privileged to be included in the group of leaders that have different ideas to help transform the future of work.
You and I, we met through Steve Gutzler. And
right.
For those out there, check out Steve Gutzler. Fantastic. One of my heroes, fantastic man. And I know he's been coaching with you for years.
Yep.
And then when he and I wrote Lead with No Fear, you were one of the people that we interviewed for that.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, Steve Gutzler. I think we started, I want to say it's 2008. He's been my executive career coach since then. So Steve and I are going on 13 years. He's just been it's kind of a funny story, Mike. Every time I hit like a tough decision in my career, I'm like trying to solve it myself, like we all do, right? And my wife's like, well, did you ask Steve? Have you talked to Steve about that? And so no, he's been a great mentor for me, and it was a privilege to be included in your book as one of the key leaders that has had a transformational learning experience throughout his career.
Yeah, that's incredible. I think a lot of people don't realize how important it is to have those kind of coaches, friends, mentors, bosses. And it's cool that you have one, but you've been one. But we'll talk about that part on the Wednesday segment of the show where we talk about employee development. Today, we're talking about leadership. Now, you started a company for, I think you said $150,000.
That's right.
And then you sold it for tens of millions.
That's right. Yeah, so we started 2.5 years ago. A buddy of mine, Scott McCabe, and we were looking at the CX industry. And if you look at customer experience, is what CX stands for, customer service, essentially $339 billion a year is lost because of poor customer service and experience from large brands all across the world. And if you look at Statista.com, it says $220 billion is spent on these types of services. So essentially you're spending $2 to lose $3. And anyone's bank account, that's a failure. And in business, it's definitely a failure. And so Scott and I were like, hey, let's turn the industry upside down. Let's really rethink how to create profit and value in the customer service and customer experience. And as you noted, we started off with $150,000 for people, an idea. And then 2.5 years later, we sold it for millions of dollars to an amazing company, Arise Virtual Solutions.
And so many people they're motivated by entrepreneurship who are watching my program. They're thinking, how can I do something? How can I be a part of something? And there's so many nuggets that you can learn along the way. And we're going to unpack some of those. Really, you're going to unpack some of those because I've never done what you've done. And I love that. We were talking about how I was in the nonprofit world beforehand. And it's not like you build up a nonprofit and sell it off. So I'm looking forward to hearing that. And then along the way, you have picked up this and said, now you're thinking about doing this again in the future. And you said yesterday, as we were just getting ready for this, that there's a lot of work that goes into something like this. So I'm excited to hear about that. Talk to us a little bit about some of the key things, something that we talked about yesterday, that whole idea of starting with a need. Talk to us about that first, and then just let's start unpacking some things that you've learned and are learning.
Yeah, I think anytime you start up a new business, I think there's some critical things that you have to think through. I think the first one is there a need or a demand for what you want to do? oftentimes individuals will state this is there a problem, right? So in our case, we identified that there was a need because customers were leaving in droves from brands. If there's a need, are you creating a unique solution that will solve the need or solve the problem? And then the third thing that I would say is this solution one that can scale over time? And the last piece is, do you have the passion, the grit, and the resilience and the willingness to go through the inherent difficult times that will come as you start a business? It's one of the hardest things to do. I wouldn't say it's, and I don't want to frame this in the wrong way. It's easier to start a business when you're doing it with 2 or 3 people, right? You start your own business, it's profitable, you've got a niche, you've got a customer base. That's amazing in itself, but it's much easier to do than if you were to say, hey, I want to scale a business that has 100 people, or that has 30 or 40 clients, or that becomes a unicorn billion in valuation, right? Those are much harder. And so as you think through those initial steps, it's really important that in addition to those items I mentioned, that you think about how do you scale, what does the team look like, what are the skill sets and competencies that you have and your co-founder has, and then what do you need to go off and acquire, and when do you need to acquire it, kind of in your growth trajectory, if that makes sense.
I love what you're talking about with the need there and really even the personality. And I thought to myself, probably some people are listening going, yeah, I'm motivated to do that. I would love to take a couple 100,000 and turn it into millions. And yet at the same time, they're thinking, but I really don't want to do what it takes to get there. And I think that that's okay. That not everybody, and I know that you do as well, that not everybody's wired the same. Some people would rather just be a part of something major and show up, do an 8 to 5. And so I think even as we're talking about this, be inspired. If you are driven towards this, start thinking about those ideas, start thinking about the unique ways, grab a hold of this. All of us can be inspired and take away lessons from what Jonathan is talking about here. But at the same time, there should never be any guilt. We read some of these books out there that are almost guilting you into being a different type of CEO, a different type of leader, a different type of business owner or worker. And I know that that's not you, and it's definitely not me as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to be true to yourself too, right? So I mean, when I decided to do a startup, I had been in the enterprise area for 20 years, and I had got frustrated because a lot of the ideas that either I had or other good ideas that my peers had, we weren't able to execute on because of the constrictions, which are normal in a large enterprise organization. And so my wife, again, was giving me some counsel. She's like, why don't you just go start your own business then? And so I was like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And when I went into it, I'd been an executive in a number of companies, and I thought my job was hard as an executive. Then I realized what a hard job was when I tried to start up a scalable business. But, everybody has different passions and things they're focused on. My mind is a mind that must be moving and doing things at all times to feel purposeful. And so being a startup CEO was perfect for me because I was able to maximize all parts of my mind to the point that I had to say, okay, I need a break from my mind for a second, which had never really happened in my entire life. I was like, actually, I'm tired, and I'm having fun. I'm excited, but I'm a little tired. And so for me, it was the perfect opportunity for me to really challenge myself and push myself, and in my own way. Like back to your point about being authentic, being yourself without guilt. My co-founder and I, Scott, we set up a set of core values. We wrote on the whiteboard even before the company was incorporated. And then we set up a couple purposeful statements. And we committed to ourselves that regardless of what happened, we would always stick to those. And we always have. Businesses change, you pivot. Being a successful entrepreneur, you often have to pivot, but you don't change your values and you don't change your purpose. You just change how you can get success and apply those values and purpose in a meaningful way. And that's actually something I'm really proud of, is that we stuck to our original values and purpose.
That is incredible. Tell us about what are they?
So, I mean, we had a couple. It's funny. I'm up in the mountains and Idaho, so I don't have it I don't have it in front of me. But on my screen back at home, I have a Post-it note where I've written them out, the original ones that I wrote out. But they're being deliberate. Like we believe, like a lot of companies, they go after the shiny ball, or they try to do things that they think are going to get them quick wins. But we tend to be more deliberate. Another one is constant curiosity. We think that innovation is the key to success. And so if you remain constantly curious and you don't rest on your laurels, then you have this opportunity to really grow. There's a mantra that we have in the company. It comes from Nelson Mandela. It's called win or learn. So we don't really believe in failure in the company. And to some extent, I think it's Simon Sinek said, he doesn't believe in failure anyway, either. He believes in falling. Sometimes you fall, you just pick yourself back up and you keep going.
Right.
And that's the same mantra of win or learn. So anytime that we have learning experiences, we do our best never to make anyone feel bad about it. We just say, hey, what did we learn from this? And how can we apply that to winning in the future? And I think that mentality helps us to have one of the best places to work culture that we've set up. We do like a lot of companies do, EMPS, and our employee net promoter score the last time we did it was like plus 65 or something. It's really high. But that's because we try to set up this culture where people are always winning or learning and growing and so forth. So there's a few other ones, our other core values around, giving back to the community, making sure that, we believe that the future of the service economy is economic capital transition from tech hubs to local communities. And that's why we set up the network inside of, Officium, and Arise has a network as well in a similar fashion. And so helping uplift local communities. Like I grew up in a town, 7,000 people. There's no way I could have the job I have now back then in the 80s, right?
Right.
Technology mindset, business wasn't there. But today I could if I wanted. And so I think that's an important, powerful thing. So those are some of our values, but those are the things that we've just kind of stuck to the whole time, regardless of how we've had to transition and pivot the business.
So here's the question that I think a lot of people are going to be asking right here. When did you realize that you were going to make it? Was there a point in time that you all of a sudden, this turned into something? Or was it from the get-go? When did you realize?
Well, it's an interesting question. So we unexpectedly got 4 customers and were profitable by month 2. So what it kind of told us was like, hey, the market is ready for what we're doing and we can be a profitable business. So really in month 2, we knew that we were going to make it. Now, we didn't know how big it was going to get. Like the velocity and the growth of the business is 10x what our initial projections were going to be. And what that just shows is that we hit the market at a specific time when people were ready for our ideas and our methodologies and our approaches. So I invented the service stack. It's a maturity model methodology that helps companies transform their customer service and customer experience teams from cost centers to profit centers and really build that lifetime value with customers. When companies start to think of their customers as decade-long customers, then it changes the paradigm and the mindset they have versus, hey, let's just optimize the cost out of customer service this year so that we can get a better bottom line EBITDA, right? That's a different mindset than, hey, let's build a framework that's going to allow these customers to be with us, be with our brand for 10 years, right? And so that's something that we invented that we've helped a lot of companies with.
So it was early on that you saw that, hey, we're on to something.
That's right.
Which not always happens, right?
Yeah. Normally it doesn't happen, to be honest.
Right. So what would you say to people in that moment? Because there's probably some nugget we can draw out of there for people who are in it or out of it in terms of success.
Well, I think, looking at it, in the beginning, we tried a lot of different things, even though we had the core premise, right? We tried a lot of different ways to engage clients and customers to understand that value. So while we had the initial success and we felt like, hey, this is something special, we weren't necessarily a fine-tuned machine or a well-formed company. It took us some time, probably 6 months to a year, to actually be operating in a systemic, fluidic way where we could drive value and scale. And so what I would say, kind of looking back, is what I might have done differently, is I would have focused a little bit more on structure, a little bit more on framework, and a little bit less on, hey, what's that? What will this work? Will that work? Will this work? Will that work? Right? Maybe a little bit more of a formed strategy is something that probably could have helped us earlier on. We eventually built those things on later, but it took some churning and it took some time to do that later. Whereas if we had that structure and that methodology in the beginning, it would have been a lot easier for us.
So was it just the excitement of checking out those things that kept you away from grabbing onto that structure?
I think it's to be honest, it's because of me. Like, my co-founder is a very structured guy, and most of the folks that we brought into the company is a very structured people. And so I just kept pushing against it. I was like, no, let's go scale. Let's go do this. Let's grab, I'm an idea guy, right? I was like, no, we got to do this. I'm going to go work 180 hours. Let's make this happen. And so, to some degree, you follow your leader, right? And so I was the leader. And so people were following my example. And in some cases, that's good, because I don't accept no. Like, yes is the champion. Not that I say yes to everything, but I don't let constraints tell me what can't be done, right? That's like when I was a kid and the doctors told me I was never going to walk again. I'd never agreed to that. And so I pushed through it. And so, like, I just have this mentality of, you can't tell me what can't be done. I'm going to show you what can be done and how it can be done. And I think that is a lot of the reason why we didn't have the structure early on. But then as we were scaling and growing, I was starting to see that, this advantage is becoming a disadvantage, because it's harder to scale without structure. And so that, Scott he's actually a great mentor of mine as well as co-founder. And we sat down and we had a conversation, and we agreed that the things that I'm great at sometimes aren't the best fit for the company's scalability. And so that I have to change some of my leadership style and approach, and to allow for the structure to exist and to grow. And so those are some learning moments for me.
It seems like to me that there's, in a lot of companies, as I talk to people, there's a need for that ideation person, and there's a need for the structure person. And in that, they both have to have full of grit. You're talking about working 180 hours a week, often, to do the type of thing that you're talking about. It's not going to come right away unless you already have done that in the past and you know how to maximize your time. But most of the people, like the gentleman I'm interviewing tomorrow, his name is Jeff Wright, and he started Fusion Projects. And he had this idea, but they didn't have the structure, and same type of deal, just working those 180-hour weeks on the road, selling his project or selling his stuff. So I love that you did that along the line, that excitement, that energy, the passion, it got the structure in it. And that's when you saw it really take off and become something scalable. Or was it a little bit later? When did you see that, oh my gosh, we got something that can scale to this level?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I get so excited about the work that I did that I even elaborate and embellish how many hours I worked for a week, since there's only 168 hours in a week. I definitely didn't do 180, but it felt like that, I think. So I think that it was about when we got.
I didn't even do the math. I just went with you.
As we were talking, and I was like, wait, I just felt like it was 180. There's only 168. I did sleep. But I think that as we started to scale and we got to that first big renewal, right? The first year you renew all your clients, right? It became apparent that, like, if we wanted to take this model to the next level, we had to incorporate more structure. We had to incorporate, goal setting, development, the traditional kind of leadership structure was in place, because the original 4 people I hired, and then even the original 9 or 10 people, I intentionally hired like really senior people so that I wouldn't have to have all of this structure. So that's part of my strategy. But as I got above 10 people, I was like, well, and Scott, as well, we were like, hey, we're gonna have to put structure in, because we're not going to be able to continue to bring on super senior people and hit kind of our gross profit margins and the scalability that we need in the business. So it was about that time where we got past the 10-person business, and we realized that in order to build a scalable business, we had to start putting things in place that all the best in class kind of scale businesses do.
Nice. You and I were talking yesterday, and one of the things that we were talking about some of my books and such, because you showed up in one of my early books, and you brought up an idea about basically, in fact, you'll see right here, I have Strengths Finder in front of me because we were talking about this kind of basis idea, and it really grabbed a hold of my imagination. So I've been actually grabbing a hold of some of that. What if I do something like what Jonathan we're talking about? Where does that come from for you? Are you constantly just reading things, thinking about things? Is it natural? Have you always been that way? Where can someone grow to grab a hold of these ideas that they could launch into? You are already starting another company. You gave me an idea yesterday. Where's that coming from? Or how can people find those ideas?
Well, I mean, I think that everybody has kind of a different strength, right? And some people will be natural at ideation. Like things will just come to them. My wife, she's a very talented designer, right? She'll walk into a room and within 30 seconds, she'll know exactly what the room needs to look like, right? There's no way I could ever do that, right? You can give me 3,000 seconds, 3 million seconds. I'm probably not going to figure that out. But one thing that I'm good at is I'm good at kind of futuristic thinking. I'm good at taking immense amounts of data, collating it together, and coming up with simple frameworks and simple ideas that could be the future of where the industry is going, right? And there's some people that are like that, right? There's some people that have ideas, but they don't realize how strong their ideas are. And so they don't necessarily need to develop their idea muscle, they need to develop their courage muscle. So taking that idea and doing something with it, not sitting on that idea. I think there's actually more.
Pause right there, because that's a great thing. You don't need to, some people listening, you don't need to really spur on your idea muscle, but your courage muscle and stepping out there and doing something about that.
That's right.
How, though, do you make sure that idea is not stupid and you're going to waste tons and tons of money and time? Because we've seen those ideas, right? And I won't call them out, where you look at it.
Well, I kind of have a different philosophy on it. Like, I think that if you're worried about your idea being stupid, the problem isn't the idea. The problem is your mindset. Carol Dweck wrote a wonderful book called The Growth Mindset and the Fixed Mindset. And so what you just talked about is a fixed mindset component, which is my idea is stupid. But the reality is like, this isn't my first startup wasn't a success. I had a failed startup back in 2005 and 6. I thought it was a great idea. It was the wrong time to the market. It was a baseball simulation game that was going to rock the market. It was going to be amazing, and it just flopped. You know, it was a good idea, wrong time, wrong execution. You know, I had an exit, but it wasn't a great exit, right? And I learned from that. So what I would say is, don't worry about if your idea is stupid. Be more focused on, have a little courage, try your idea. Don't go all in if you're a little bit nervous, but try it in bite-sized morsels. Okay, that idea worked. We'll try a bigger idea and a bigger idea. You don't have to go 0 to 60. Like, one of the things that I see a lot of founders doing, they're like, hey, I want to build a unicorn, so I'm going all in. Well, Scott and I didn't want to do that. We're like, hey, we don't need to build a unicorn. Why don't we just try to build something that at least 5 companies would find useful? And if 5 companies find useful, then maybe let's go to 10, and then let's go to 20 and 30. So that would be my feedback to that, is have that courage, try it out. If the first time it's not successful, it's okay. Learn from it, and then determine when you want to try again. And you can also try ideas in big companies. You don't have to do your first big idea in a startup. You can try an idea in a big company, and you can get, like, I was 20 years in big enterprises. So by the time I went to do my second startup, I had 20 years in big enterprises, 1 failed startup. I had the courage to take whatever was going to hit me, right? because I tried a bunch of ideas in big companies, and I knew what I could do and what I had the capability to do if I just believed in myself. And that's kind of how I would frame that, if that makes sense.
I think it does. I love that you had that time working some other places and you were able to build up that courage too and build that up. I got a chance to interview a gentleman who had worked for a couple different companies. And then after that, like you, started out his own. He was able to get some of that experience. Yeah. Sometimes that's a great way to do it. Just interviewed a gentleman though, who started something when he was 20 something, Chandler Bolt. And for him, it was something really young, but he had that courage and he was able to build something that has been fantastic.
Well, that's the thing though, I think, is there's many different ways to start your own company. And I think you're honing in on an important one. Whereas in my 20s, there's no way I would have been ready, but other people are. And so if you have that courage, go after it.
I love what we've done here. In 2 days, we're going to air the second part to this, where we're talking about employee development. But let me just pause here and go back to the beginning. I think there's a great aspect of learning from people, whether they're like you or not. And I'm glad that people are having a chance to hear from you. And then hearing that structure versus that scale and that innovation aspect, and knowing what they need and applying it at the right time and getting those coaches and those mentors around you, Scott, Steve, people like that. Yeah. And then I think a great final note for us in this first part is just to step out and courage. What have you been thinking about doing? Even if it's just asking someone out or, investing in something, just something small. And what have you been thinking about? And take the step to advance, take that courage to do it. Hey, thanks for having me, or thanks for being with me on this first portion. Is there anything left that you just say right here you want to give a tidbit on how to advance?
I would just say, believe in yourself, write out what you want to achieve. If you write it, it will happen. If you don't write it and you only think it, it's just a thought process. There's not action. Write it out and make it happen, and you can do it. And thanks for listening.
Thanks so much. Appreciate that. Absolutely. Believe in yourself. Check that out. Follow it up. If you like this, go ahead and like, share, put it on your Facebook or LinkedIn or somewhere else. Invite other people. Make sure that you subscribe so that you can check out what's coming up when Jonathan comes back and talks about building the team that took it from 150,000 to tens of millions. Until next time, this is Mike Acker.
Thanks for listening to Advance with Mike Acker, a podcast designed to provide an edge for leaders through improving practical leadership skills and increasing confidence in speaking. Mike is a best-selling author and business owner who has helped many leaders increase their skills and their confidence, propelling them to new heights in their personal and professional endeavors. Join an incredible group of professionals taking the steps to become better leaders at connect.stepstoadvance.com. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.